Hello, a quick note before the stories tonight. First, I want to say thank you again to C-Slide1987 for letting me read his stories on the last long video. I accidentally misgendered C-Slide and mispronounced his name. He's a gentleman, not a lady, so sorry again. Thank you for being awesome and not minding at all. These stories are going to be a little bit different. They're an answer to an Ask Reddit. What was the scariest experience that you've had in your life that you can only explain by the paranormal? So I hope you enjoyed this kind of change of pace, and let me know what you think in the comments. Our first response is from UAZNINVZN70. When I was like 3 or 4, my grandmother passed away, and soon after, all of my extended family flew into town to have the funeral. A week after the funeral, some relatives were still in town, including my uncle and his family. My grandmother wanted us to sell the house after she passed, so my family did exactly that. It was hectic because we were trying to pack everything up. Meanwhile, everyone still had to go to work and school. On one of the days that we had to pack up the house, my parents both had work, my older cousins had school, and my uncles and aunts had jobs and other stuff to do. However, my one uncle, my grandma's oldest son, was available to watch me for a couple of hours, so he did. According to him, I asked to go to the bathroom while he was watching TV. The closest bathroom was in my grandparents' old room, so I went in there. When I came back, I asked my uncle who the nice lady was on the bed. He kind of played along with it because he might have thought that it was an imaginary friend or something. He asked me questions about her to entertain me. I described her as dark-haired, kind of white, and wearing a blue nightgown. When I said that, my uncle freaked out because my grandmother always wore a light blue nightgown to sleep. After that, my uncle and I left the house and waited outside for my parents to come back home. Our next response is from U/BeachHouseMoney. A somewhat similar experience. I was 9 years old and distinctly remember waking to see an elderly man, a stranger, sitting on my bed. It's so vivid 37 years later. I remember in detail how bright the sun shone through white gauze curtains, being wide awake and clutching my pink braided bedspread up to my chin, just gazing up at this man who was looking down at me and smiling. He had a big, beautiful, and kind smile. I remember his blue eyes and thinning white hair, the visible scalp, even the white sweater and gray slacks he was wearing. He didn't say anything, just patted my knee through the bedspread. He looked delighted, and there were crinkles at the corners of his eyes. He looked like he had been telling me like a bedtime story that I interrupted. This is a thought I clearly remember, like I just awoke to a bedtime story. I remember feeling not a bit scared. Truthfully, I was awed because I'd never seen someone who looked like him. My family and I are all Mexican American. We all have the typically associated dark hair, dark eyes, and olive skin combo. This man was just so white, fair skin, snowy, transparent hair, and those blue, blue eyes. It was like he was glowing even in my sunlit room. He looked down at me for a few more seconds, still smiling, and the next thing I knew, my mom entered the room and he was gone. Of course, the first thing I did was ask her who that man was and where he went. I would never forget my mom's worried, panicked look as I asked her this. She ran out of the room, I guess to make a sweep of our small apartment, and then ran back in to ask me so many questions. I told her everything, and that was that. She calmed down, I got out of bed, and we had a normal day. Years later, as an adult, I asked my mom if she remembers me ever telling her about a nice man sitting next to me in the bed. She was shocked that I recalled that morning, but then told me based on my descriptions that she was convinced her grandfather had paid me a visit from the beyond. He was from Spain and, quote, looked like a gringo, she said, right down to the blue, blue eyes and the thinning white hair. She said he was always smiling, and yes, favored a sweater and slack combo. He passed away about 30 years before I was born. Our next response is from u/DZULOMAR. I don't know what to think about it, but here goes. Around 8 years ago, I was on vacation with my parents and my cousin. My sister couldn't come as she had just started her first job, so she stayed home by herself. When we were children, both my sister and I, we had been really close, mainly because we shared a room. We used to have our code with taps asking things like, "Are you already asleep?" Or "Are they," meaning our parents, "asleep?" It was stuff like that. She is also always doing something or looking for something to do, always being the first up. So when she was up and wanted me to wake up, she would place her face as close to mine as possible and just stare at me. I don't know for how long she would stay like this, but I can clearly remember multiple times waking up to her doing this. I, of course, would shout or at least panic until realizing it was her. I guess it was fun for her, and I have to admit, I also did it a couple of times. So now we're on our trip. It's been at least 10 or 12 years since the last time my sister pulled this prank on me. My sister and I are not as close as we used to be. We've certainly grown a little apart, but we still love each other. It was the last night in our trip before heading back to the city. We just had to find this nice hotel close to the pyramids, which meant no cell phone service. We were sharing a room, my mom and dad in the first bed, and my cousin and I in the other one. At some point around 4 a.m., I woke up to the same old sensation, like someone is staring at me. So I opened my eyes and I could clearly see a face. My immediate reaction was to shout, waking my mother up. I have to say, the sensation by itself is really scary. But the years of experience with my sister waking me up like this took some of the threat away. So despite my shouting, I wasn't scared because it was just too familiar. My mom turned on the light and asked me what happened. I told her that I was pretty sure my sister had just woken me up. I didn't know how to make it make any sense, but I felt like it was her. Though I can't say that I saw her face, I just saw a face, and then it disappeared immediately. My mom was really superstitious, so she couldn't sleep after that because she felt like something was odd, and I just couldn't sleep because I was thinking of my sister. Later that day in the morning, we noticed we had a lot of missed calls. My sister was involved in a really bad car accident. Luckily, she only had minor injuries. To this day, I don't know what to make out of the experience. My brain tells me it's just a coincidence. On the other hand, it's the only way I would have thought of my sister sleeping there. It was just so real. So real and between the both of us. As an extra, on our previous visit to the area, we were at the ruins and we could hear some drums. My parents said it was raining and we were playing in the ponds, and at some point, the drums just started playing. Our curiosity made us follow the sound, getting us deeper and deeper into the jungle. I can't remember why we stopped, but when we finally made it to the exit and asked the security guard about the music, he said, "Oh, you heard the drums as well?" And then he proceeded to tell us that a lot of people have heard them at different times, but they didn't know the source of it. Our next response is from u/XENmaster. I woke up from a nap to the sound of my girlfriend sobbing somewhere else in the house. I got up to see what was wrong and determined the sound was coming from downstairs. I followed the sound down the spiral staircase all the way to our finished basement. The sound was definitely coming from a little half bath at the bottom of the stairs that we rarely used. The door was closed, which it never was, and I couldn't see any light from under the door, but the sound was very loud from the bottom of the stairs. It was about this time I started to fully wake up and remember my girlfriend had been leaving for the grocery store when I started my nap. I could see her parking spot from one of the basement windows, and she wasn't back yet. I called her name, and the sobbing instantly stopped. The bathroom was empty when I finally got the courage to check. Our next response is from u/Sinker23. I don't know if this is a common happening or whatever, but when I was around 13 or 14, the same thing happened to me. I went downstairs in the middle of the night to pee. I had to go through the living room to get to the bathroom. My mom was sleeping on the couch. When I was in the bathroom, I heard my mom crying bloody murder, like screaming help, crying, like she was in trouble. I drew up my pants and ran out to the living room, ready to save the day. Only she's fast asleep, curled up on the couch. At that moment, I got this impending sense of doom feeling. Now that I think about it, I should have tried to wake her up to see if she was okay. But instead, I ran upstairs to my bedroom and tried to read a happy book before trying to fall asleep again. She never was the type to play jokes on us, especially ones where she pretended to be in danger. She never admitted anything, but I'm convinced it wasn't her who was screaming for help. When I got older, I learned a lot of creepy stuff happened in that house. My parents didn't tell me as a kid because they didn't want to scare me. All in all, your story freaked me out because it was so similar to mine. Well, thank you for listening to these stories tonight. A little bit different. Something else to add to the true story playlist here on the channel. If you haven't already, check out some of my other videos. Most of them are fictions, creepypastas, or just original horror stories written by myself and others. Also, I'll put a link to my Discord server in the description. And I guess a link to my Twitter. I recently asked on Twitter, what scares you? And Willow the Skitter responded, myself. If you haven't checked out his channel, there'll be a link to his in the description below also. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.